All right. I think we got the stream open. Let me double check, make sure everything's live. There we go. YouTube should be live. Facebook's live. I think Twitch is live. We just finished up the Atheist experience with Ian, and as would be expected, Ian crushed it. Just absolutely crushed it. So, if you haven't watched the Atheist experience from tonight with me and allegedly Ian, I would definitely encourage you to go back and watch it when you get some time to. Those of you from TikTok Spaces already know who Ian is. Already know that Ian, of course, is going to crush it. So, but anyways, our first caller was quite a doozy. But you want to listen to the whole call. Definitely want to listen to the whole call. It was a wild one. Definitely near the end, he had to walk back quite a few positions and twist himself into a pretzel. But Timothy, welcome to the Kraken crew. Big W, thank you for supporting the channel. So I had a number of people ask me this week and last week to do a Q&A after AXP. I don't know if I ever envisioned myself doing so many Q&As, but I think people enjoy asking questions and having them answered. So I'll probably keep doing them as time allows when I have short nights like after the XP live streams. So uh, anyways, welcome here, guys. Good to see you. Is the audio working? Everything good to go? I don't have TikTok open, so there should be a lot less mess to work with in order to get all the audio and the video working. I wish there was a good way to stream to TikTok using a third-party software that allowed you to take guests. It's annoying that you can't, and it's really annoying too that like TikTok doesn't have a good option to in their studio to stream anywhere else. Like you can't stream it to YouTube, you can't stream it to Twitch. You can only stream from TikTok Studio directly to TikTok. But we're definitely in an era where people want to stream to all of the platforms, all the places, right? I think, especially with TikTok, like possibly going away, I certainly think that they would be better off embracing multi-platform streaming. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's just me. Call me crazy. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But certainly, like if you're a streamer and you want to increase your profile, it makes sense to stream to multiple platforms. But Acme Hero just sent out 5 Deconstruction Zone memberships. Big W, Acme Hero. I appreciate that. Looks like Mr. Tox got it. Hal C got one. Coffee RN. Funny Self got one. And Booch all received a membership. Big W, Acme Hero. I really appreciate that. That's very generous. And our friend Amir is here. Amir's been a member now for 5 months. Like literally was one of the first members. Thank you so much for being a continued member of the channel, Amir. And Amir says, "Thank you for your work, Justin. You're awesome." Well, Amir, thank you for supporting my work. You're awesome. Like I couldn't do my work, especially not as much as I do it, without getting support from the community. I'm able right now to stream almost 20 hours a week, and I can only do it because that means, I'm getting support from the community and I'm not working overtime, right? Prior, prior I would have to work, a certain number of hours of overtime, to get things done. But if I'm being supported by the community, here in the deconstruction community, through memberships and super chats and whatnot, I can spend more time actually doing this and less time doing my day job. You know what I mean? And Amir says, oh yeah, didn't say anything. Amir sent another Deconstruction Zone gifted membership. Well, big W, Amir. I appreciate that. And also, Randy's with us tonight. Good to see you, Randy. Randy sent out 5 Deconstruction Zone gifted memberships. Big W, Randy. And everyone who's at the Kraken Crew Elite level should have access to the cheat sheet. I'm going to be dropping a pretty big update to it shortly, so definitely look out for that. Also, I did update it like 2 weeks ago with a really huge update that everyone might not know, but on the Apocrypha tab, I added a link to another document that I put together. And in that additional document, it lists every single early church father in the first 400 years. It lists all of their references to the Apocrypha. So you can see what the actual early church fathers what they thought of the Apocrypha, and why my position is that the Apocrypha should be included in all Bibles. So that's a hell of a document. I definitely recommend going through that. I've got like, I don't know, I've got like 75 or 100 different quotations on that document from the early church. So it took me a while to put it together. I probably spent months on it, probably 3 months doing it. But Carlos, thank you for gifting out 10 Deconstruction Zone memberships. Big W, Carlos. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for gifting out the memberships. And 5 more from Randy Wilson. Guys, thank you so much for gifting out the memberships. I really appreciate it. And for anyone who receives a gifted membership to the Kraken Crew Elite level, you'll have access to the cheat sheet. And I personally believe that the cheat sheet is the best way to do deconstruction. I think there's a lot of good resources on there. And Disco says, sounds like your webcam mic is on, not your sure. Thank you so much for letting me know that, actually. Give me 1 second to double check my audio and see what's happening with that. Because if that's the case, we got a problem. Okay, it should be selected correctly now. Let me know if it's still picking up the wrong microphone. I was just recently in a Discord, and the Discord may have disconnected my sound from my microphone and sent it to the Discord, and then probably stole my microphone here from the webcam to feed it elsewhere when I opened up Streamlabs. So that's probably what happened. Let me know if that takes care of it, though. Is that better, guys? Yeah, Derek is saying that is better. Thanks for letting me know. Sometimes that happens when you've got multiple applications open. Like one application will be using your default microphone. So when you open up another application, it'll search for like another microphone not being used and just immediately grab that. But thank you so much for letting me know. I really appreciate that. We don't want 2 hours of shit audio. And Beth says, teach us how to Dougie tonight. Well, I'm certainly going to do my best, Beth, and I appreciate you being here. And with that, let me grab some questions. First in is going to be my friend Morpheus. 1 second. 1 second. Let's see if we can get this to work. All right, let me see if this works now. There we go. How you doing, Morpheus?
Hey, what's up, bro?
It's been a minute.
Yeah, been a minute. Been a minute. I was watching earlier when you was on the Atheist Experience, and you said something like near the end of the show talking to that guy, and I was interested in about 2 Kings 3 about the war between the Moab and Israelites, and you said Yahweh got his butt kicked.
Yeah.
Can you explain it? Can you go into that a little bit for me?
Yeah, okay. So in 2 Kings chapter 3, there's a war against the Moabites, and the king even gets like a prophet to give him word, like, hey, should we go to war? Is this a thing we should even do? And the prophet gets a word back from God and is like, yes, God will hand them over to you. It says in verse 19, you shall conquer every fortified city and every choice city. Every good tree you shall fell, all the springs of the water you will stop up, and every good piece of land you shall ruin with stones. Okay, so that sounds pretty promising. You're going to conquer all, you're going to be victorious, right? And then the war kind of ensues, and it turns out that it starts to feel like it's true. But then as the war progresses, the Moabite king is like, I've got an idea. In verse 26, it says, when the king of Moab saw that the battle was going against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him, and offer him as a burnt offering on the wall. And a great wrath came upon Israel, so they withdrew from him and returned to their own land. So when the king of Moab sacrificed his firstborn son on the wall, it said a wrath came upon Israel, meaning some sort of divine entity like Kemosh, the god of the Moabites, came and provided his wrath, so much so that it chased the Israelites away, and Yahweh got his butt whooped.
So it's interesting because I was reading, and some of the, I guess some apologists, even sites, AI was saying that he didn't really, Yahweh didn't really lose. They was backing up anyway. You know what I mean? It's like nah. So their apologist argument it was that they didn't really lose. They were retrieving back anyway.
Right.
I'm like, you know what I mean? It's like, nah, buddy, that ain't what happened.
Not at all what happened. And in fact, if you read the writings of the Mesha Stele, actually, let me grab you a translation of the Mesha Stele. It's also referred to as the Moabite stone.
Right. Yeah. I know about it. Yep.
But on the actual stele, it's really interesting because there's bragging about how they defeated the God of Israel. Let me find it real quick.
Oh.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it on the screen. Give me 1 second to make sure everyone can see it. Let's see right here. That should be the guy. All right. I'll blow the text up a little bit bigger. Oop. There we go. And it says, Kemosh, that's the god of the Moabites, said to me, "Go and take Nebo from Israel." And I went in the night and I fought against it from daybreak until midday. And I took it and I killed the whole population, 7,000 male subjects and aliens and female subjects, aliens and servant girls. For I put it to the ban, that's like a harem in the biblical speak. That's what the ban is, for Ashtar Kemosh. And from there I took Yahweh's vessels and I presented them before Kemosh's face. So the king of Moab was so successful against the Israelites that he was able to go into the temple, take the vessels of Yahweh from the temple, and offer them to his God. So Yahweh really got his ass whooped.
Wow. Nobody wants to talk about that part though, huh?
Right. Hail Kemosh.
Yeah, Kmosh was victorious, but nobody wants to talk about that, huh?
That's right. If I got to pick a fighter, I'm picking Kemosh over Yahweh.
Exactly. All right, right. And one more thing. Before I let you go to the next person. I emailed you, right? And I had a thought process because I've been noticing that with all these shows and listening to a lot of Christians, right? And I came to figure out. I said, you know what? Maybe we should take some time to do some shows dedicated to the distinction between Paul and Jesus, because most 99% of Christians are following Paul, thinking that they're following Jesus. So we got to call that Paul the disciple or deceiver, or something to that effect. You know what I mean? Because most Christians think they're following Jesus, whether he was real, not, or whatever. They still think they're following Jesus and not realizing everything they're doing is Paul.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you mentioned it. I've been meaning to put together a debate topic just for that because I've gotten a ton of people wanting to do that debate topic. So it'll be forthcoming soon. I'm going to be doing a debate topic of the different, the contradictions between Paul and Jesus. And we're going to have a lot of fertile ground there.
Okay. So I'm spot on.
You are.
I'm spot on because I'm going. Most of the time I talk, they're quick to quote Paul, Corinthians, Romans, Acts, Galatians. Everything is Paul. And I'm like, these guys don't even realize who they're following.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm gonna hang out in the back chat. And I'll just watch a while until, something or whatever comes up, okay?
Absolutely. Good to hear from you, Morpheus.
All right, my brother. Take care.
Big fan of Morpheus. He's awesome. Let's see. Chip with a super chat says, "How do I upgrade from basic to elite Kraken crew on YouTube? I can't figure it out. But no, I'm not a boomer." Well, so it's under the join button, and let me think. I've joined a couple people, like a couple YouTube pages as a member, but I've never like upgraded once I've joined. So I'm not sure if there's an additional button to upgrade, but my guess is if you hit that join button on the screen, and I could tell you actually what it looks like. Give me 1 second. Because I can log in to YouTube under a different account and then go to my main account and click click the button and see what it looks like. Okay, so I didn't even subscribe to my other stream. All right, so I'm in my other stream now, and so this is where the button is, just underneath my profile. If I click join, it'll ask me to join the elite or the non-elite, right? So you can select which one you want to join. Now, my guess is if I join the Kraken Crew standard, my guess is I'll be able to click the same join button again later. So I'm going to buy a subscription to myself. See what happens. Okay, and then I can see perks if I do that. Now, the join button is still there, so I can click it again, and I can change my membership to the Kraken Crew Elite. So now I just gave myself upgraded membership to the Kraken Crew Elite. So that's apparently that's the process. It didn't seem too painful. It's just the join button on the main screen. So definitely appreciate that. Good question though, Chip. Hopefully that helps. If not, hit me up in the Discord afterwards. We'll get you figured out. And writing Jake, thank you so much for the super chat. Says opinion on the man claiming to be Mahdi lately. I actually don't follow that whole situation. Give me a second to do a refresher. Let's see. Mahdi is an Islamic eschatological figure. Oh, who's appearing at the end of the times. Okay. I briefly remember a slight discussion with somebody about this. I can't say that I could speak intelligently about it, but my personal opinion is that anyone who is predicting to be an end times bringer is get them on the record making predictions that you can test. That's what you need to do. Find something that you can quiz them with to demonstrate that they're actually divine in some type of a way. You know what I mean? And Kill DM, I don't know if I could say that whole name. It sounds like a bad thing to say. Says background typo. I appreciate the alert. I forgot that old background actually had the misspelled title. And I had made a new one that had this little video animation, and I forgot about it until you until you sent the chat. So thank you so much for sending the chat. I really appreciate that. The amount of backgrounds I've created with typos is unbelievable. It's such a high amount that I'm shocked that I don't catch more of them. But the reality is I don't really like self-check my my typing. When I'm doing a lot of this stuff, I'm just like on the go, just like banging it out and not thinking that maybe I mistyped something. And then usually the audience lets me know pretty quick if I did. Big W to the audience for catching all these, by the way. And Johnny Black says, who would win a fight between Jesus versus Horus? That's a tough one because I can't. Jesus didn't really exhibit any superpowers that were great. Like he could like read minds and he could like heal people, but like he didn't like shoot flaming sun rays out and kill anybody. I don't know. And Jesus himself seemed to be limited in knowledge. There were things he didn't know, only the Father knew. Whereas I think Horus is greater than that. So who would win in a fight between Horus and Jesus? I'd lean towards Horus. But then again, Jesus had like really awesome abs. Jesus had a full 6-pack of Dougs on those abs. So that's a tough one. You know, I'm torn between the all-seeing, was it the all-seeing eye of Horus? Isn't he the eye? Let me double check. And the rock-hard abs of Jesus. Let's see. No, he was the bird. Who was the eye in Egyptian mythology? Oh, no, it was Horus. Yeah. So Horus is the bird with the all-seeing eye. That's what I thought. Okay. Yeah, I got my money on the Birdman with the all-seeing eye. That's who I'm going with 1,000,000%. Plus, I think Egypt has a number of dying and rising gods too, doesn't he? Let me see. Didn't Horus get resurrected at some point? Okay, Horus does have a rebirth. So Horus's resurrection is a cycle of rebirth. So yeah, Horus has got all the shit Jesus has got. He's got dying and rebirth. He's got better vision than Jesus. As far as I can tell, the only thing he doesn't have is abs, but the dude's got wings. He can, you know what I mean? He is. Anyways, I'm going to go with Horus. That's what I'm thinking. And welcome to the Kraken crew. Welcome in, John. I appreciate that. And Epiphany, thank you so much for the 20MX, as Doug is the Omni Heavy Rock God Can't Lift. Cheers. You nailed it. That's how you know that Doug is superior to Yahweh, because Doug is the rock that Yahweh couldn't lift. That's why that paradox works out. And holy shit, look at this asshole subscribing to the Kraken Crew Elite. Big W, DZ Debates. By the way, this is where I'm posting most of my debate stuff in the future. I'm going to eventually try to post less of my debates on my main channel and do more educational content. Obviously, I'll still have debate clips on my main channel, but this new channel is literally just for debate clips. Like, if you don't care about my educational content and you don't really care about my live streams, you just want to see like the most horrific debate replays, you'll find them here. That's all you're going to find on this channel, is the most entertaining debate replays. And Saint Brush, thank you for the 666, says, seems like the Eden story has less to do with sin as some cosmic evil force, and more like Yahweh and the gods fearing humans will become like them. So you're not the first one to recognize this. This is my reading of the text as well. And you can find something similar to this in the writings of like John Walton and Klaus Westermann as well. So the way like the scholars word it is that the gods are concerned with maintaining the barrier between God and men, right? Which is why God is so afraid of the tower that gets built. And in chapter 9, what's God say? God is said, you know, there's nothing that they can't do. Well, why would that be a concern of God? Well, because he's obviously afraid that they're going to do something. And if you read like the book of Jasher and some other Jewish literature, it becomes clear that the thing that God was afraid they were going to do was enter into the heavens, right? And this was actually a pretty common theme in the ancient world. I'm going to pull up a quote for you real quick. So there's in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's a really interesting quote from Gilgamesh trying to figure out like, this situation with mortals being stuck here on earth and having to die, whereas the gods are up there in the heavens and they don't die. They live forever, right? And at one point, Gilgamesh says, who can climb to the heavens and become immortal? Only a member of the divine assembly live forever. So there's this kind of idea in the ancient Near East where, like, if you could only get yourself into the heavens where the gods are, you can become immortal like the gods. And this seems to be the thing that God is wanting to prevent. He does not want mankind to climb up to the heavens and become immortal. And so we see a little bit of this echoed in Genesis, where in Genesis 3:22, God says, man has become like one of us. Let's grab that real quick. So the general concern is a concern for protection. Then the Lord said, see, humans have become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now they might reach out their hands and take also from the tree of life and eat forever. Therefore, God sent them forth out of the Garden of Eden. So now that they know good and evil, it seems like they have the capacity for doing evil. God's like, we can't let them live forever. We gotta kick them out of the Garden of the Gods, and they've got to be out there now. They can't be with us. And so that seems to be implied in the early chapters of Genesis. And I would expect that, because the first 11 chapters of Genesis completely parallels what we find in the ancient Babylonian mythologies. It's basically a retort addressing those mythologies, essentially offering a correction to the mythologies, but of the biblical variety. And Chip, you figured it out, friend. Chip upgraded to the Kraken Crew Elite. Big W, Chip. I'm glad that you were able to get your upgrade working, and thank you so much for upgrading. And Acme Hero, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, Justin, welcome to the Cracking Crew Elite. I finally made it, guys. I'm finally in the Cracking Crew Elite. Thank you so much. And also, Ivis Gonzalez Florin, welcome to the Cracking Crew. Big W. And also, thank you so much, De Leonteri. Thank you so much for the $1 super thanks. I appreciate that. And Dr. Pizza's with us tonight. Good to see you, Dr. Pizza. Says, is there a difference? I'm sorry, my brain added difference. I don't know why I did that. Is there a resource for historical events in the Middle East that parallels the Bible? Yes. Yes, there is. And I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so there are a couple good resources. I'm going to give you one resource that you can find for free in PDF form, although the ones that I'm able to find on the internet, it's only got half the book. Like the other half is missing for some reason. Other than that, I haven't found a full PDF of it online, but it's like pretty soon it's going to be in the public domain, like any day now. I think it has to be 75 years old. And this was released initially in like the 50s. So like we're on the precipice of it being in the open domain, but there's a really good book called Ancient Near Eastern Texts Relating to the Old Testament. And I love it. I love it so much that I paid my hard-earned money to get a hard copy of it some time ago. And in this book, you'll find shit tons of ancient Near Eastern literature that parallels stuff that's happening in the Old Testament. And you've even got lots of like prophecies. And you'll discover like these prophecies that we find in the Bible, like these geopolitical prophecies about kings and battles and whatnot. That's not unique. I've got, dozens and dozens and dozens of prophecies in this book from ancient Assyrian prophets and ancient Babylonian prophets that were making predictions. A lot of them even came true, but we certainly wouldn't say that their gods are real because they were able to predict these things. Now, the other volume, and this is going to be expensive, and I apologize, but this is the best volume to get right now. Give me 1 second. It's a 4-volume set. Now, for a long time, they were sold in 3-volume set. Let's see if you can buy all 4 volumes at once. The 4th volume is pretty recent. It used to come in just the 3. Now there's a 4th that was added to it. I don't know if you can, you used to be able to buy them straight online. There we go. You can buy the soft copy of it through Accordance for $289. Let me show you. So this is a set called Context of Scripture, and you can get all 4 volumes, it looks like, through Accordance for $289. I think I got the first 3 volumes back in 2010 for like $450 back then. So you can also get the soft copy through Logos. Oh shit, they did get pirated. There's pirated copies on the internet now. Here's a copy on archive.org. Let's see if this is just an edition that you can check out. If it loads, there we go. So on archive.org, there is an edition you can borrow, the Context of Scripture, and this is 472 pages. This is just volume 3, it looks like, but you might be able to find the other volumes on here as well. So you can't download them, but you might be able to check them out of the library. So, and then they're published by Brill. You can buy them directly from Brill. I own all 4 volumes through the Logos software. Let's see what they're charging. So the Context of Scripture through the Logos software is shit. It's a huge discount from when I first purchased it like 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. They're selling it for $219 for volumes 1 through 3. Definitely a steal at $219. That being said, it is a huge undertaking to put together this set of resources. And these are maybe the most used volumes in the study of the Old Testament as it relates to the ancient Near East. And I'll give you an example. So I got a 5-volume commentary set, and this is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary, where they're doing cultural backgrounds and archaeological backgrounds on the individual books of the Bible through the commentary study. And what you'll find is if you go to the footnotes in these chapters. So, for example, Deuteronomy was done by Eugene Carpenter. Okay, I'm not sure all nasty. Deuteronomy was done by Eugene Carpenter, and I remember I knew Eugene personally, and I remember he had bragged about his commentary on Deuteronomy, saying, I think he said of the 5 books of the Torah, he used the most footnote references to the context of Scripture than the other authors did. But if you look at it, so here's a page, and what you'll find is there's like dozens and dozens of references that start with COS. COS means context of Scripture. So if you're asking yourself, what are the actual scholars using as like a really good go-to reference for first-hand documents, first-hand pieces of text in archaeology? I think the context of Scripture is probably the very first place that they're turning to these days. The rest of them, if you go outside of the context of Scripture, the rest of them are going, say, to actual papers from like the universities doing the archaeological digs. They're doing, rather than going to volumes of data, they're going to individual pieces of data. There is one more book you might want to be aware of, and this one I know is free. This is called Cuneiform Parallels to the Old Testament by Samuel Driver. And this you can get for free on archive.org or various other websites. And one second, it'll load. And Samuel Driver is amazing, by the way. You guys probably heard me mention the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew Dictionary before. So the BDB, the Brown Driver Briggs, the driver is the last name of Samuel Driver. He was an Assyriologist that was also an Old Testament scholar, and he wrote a book, one of the first of its kind, called Cuneiform Parallels to the Old Testament. And I would highly recommend this book for anyone. It's full of stories from the ancient world. Unfortunately, a lot of them are fragmentary in nature, but it's got a lot of stuff. It's got the war annals of Sennacherib and Sargon II, and it's got the mythological stuff. So you've got like the creation accounts, you've got the genealogies, you've got wisdom literature. It even includes an early version of the myth of Adapa. So this is just a really good resource that's free. It's been out long enough that it's in the open domain. You can get a copy of it anywhere. I would highly recommend it if you just want something free that is going to be able to dip your toes into literature from the ancient Near East that is relevant to the study of the Old Testament. Definitely a great place to start. Good question, though. And Sark says, why do you suppose the beast in Revelation 3:2 is described exactly how Yahweh describes himself in Hosea 13:4-8? It's too close to be a coincidence. I'm not sure I know exactly what you're referring to, because the beast in Revelation is described under various terms. Like there's not just one way to describe it. But let me see what type of connection you're trying to make here in Hosea 13. To be fair, the God of the Old Testament sounds a whole lot like the evil beast from the sea, though. He says, "Yet I have been the Lord your God ever since Egypt." Let me move this. There we go. Ever since Egypt, you know no God but me, and besides me there's no Savior. It was I who fed you in the wilderness in the land of the drought. When I fed them, they were satisfied. When they were satisfied and their heart was proud, therefore they forgot me. So I will become like a lion to them, like a leopard. I will lurk beside the way. I will fall upon them like a bear robbed of her cubs. I will tear open the covering of their heart, and I will devour them like a lion as a wild animal mangles them. I'm not sure how that relates to Revelation 13. That's not how the beast is described in Revelation 13. So I guess maybe I don't know if you mistyped your question or got the wrong verse or something, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you though that Yahweh is generally kind of a despicable beast like God, though. I think we agree there. And Master Machete here says, "What's your favorite obscure Bible story?" I think we were just talking about that earlier on the Atheist Experience, and I pointed to 2 Kings chapter 3, where Moab defeated Israel in battle. But there's a lot of really good obscure Bible stories. And like a bunch of them are in the book of Kings. You'll find a lot of really good ones in there. In fact, there's really here's one. I used to point to the raising of the Shunammite woman's dead son by Elisha by laying out spread eagle on him and putting his mouth to his mouth and hands to the hands. And it's such a weird ritual to bring someone back from the dead, especially a child. But there's another story that people don't they don't talk about too often. And this is the story of Abishag. And Abishag, man, I kind of feel bad for Abishag. But let me get into it. Let me tell you about Abishag. Okay, let me move the super chat though. So in 1 Kings chapter 1, when David is old and nearing death, there's this really interesting thing that happens. It says, King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not keep warm. So his servants said to him, "Let a young virgin be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be his attendant. Let her lie in your bosom so that my lord the king may be warm." So they searched for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel and found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful. Interesting they had to say it twice. She became the king's attendant and served him, but the king did not know her sexually. And on that, I'm going to say, bullshit. You don't search the entire kingdom for a hottie toddy to lie with you and keep you warm if, in fact, you were not going to have relations with her. That's ridiculous. And then later, one of David's sons asks for Abishag's hand in marriage, and it's taken as though it's an affront, which seems to suggest that she was married or having relations or belonged to somebody else, or else it wouldn't be an affront to the king. So read the first 2 chapters of Kings and you'll get the full story. But holy shit, the story of Abishag is a wild story. And did she get shagged? Obviously, she got shagged. Let's see what else we got in here. Tom, thank you for the 66. Tom says, "What are your top 3 book recommendations for inspiring atheists?" Well, I think the people who know my channel well know my first recommendation, which is going to be the New Oxford Annotated Study Bible, which I'll show you. So this is the New Oxford Annotated Study Bible with the Apocrypha. I've got the 4th and the 5th and the 3rd augmented edition. This is the 5th edition. Some people have kind of tongue-in-cheek referred to this Bible as the Atheist Bible because the notes in here are purely scholarly in nature. They're not study notes for pastors. They're not study notes for devotional time. These are purely academic study notes in this Bible. And so this is a really good place to start if you want to read the Bible and know what academics are actually saying about the individual passages, and without the apologetic fluff, without the apologetic nonsense. In fact, you'll even be able to get to see the Old Testament scholars disagreeing with the New Testament scholars. When you read the passages about how the New Testament uses the Old Testament, when you read the way the New Testament scholar is interpreting the Old Testament passage, they will directly contradict how the Old Testament scholar is interpreting the passage. So you'll get to see that cognitive dissonance in real time. It's crazy. Two other books that might be really good for aspiring atheists. I might recommend, if you're coming from Christianity, most of the books by Bart Ehrman, but I would start light and do like misquoting Jesus. I think that's a good place to dip your toes in the world of atheistic scholarship of the Bible, and also get your palate wet for textual criticism. Obviously, that book is for the masses. It's not for scholars, so you're not going to get too deep in the textual criticism, but it's a good place to start. It'll get the gears turning. That being said, another book for aspiring atheists. I don't know, because I know lots of books about deconstructing from Christianity, because that's what I did, and I think the scholarship led me there. Another book on this you might want to endeavor upon is the Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy, and I'll say that again. It's the Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy. I enjoy the book. As for books on atheism proper, I haven't actually read that many. I came to atheism on my own. I didn't read Dawkins. I didn't read what's his face, the British guy. What was his name? Hitchens. I didn't read Hitchens. I didn't read any books by the Four Horsemen of New Atheism. I came to atheism on my own, just through like critically thinking about different concepts. But that being said, there are lots of good books. I've been recently turned on to Graham Oppy, from the philosophy side, thanks to allegedly Ian. So this next month or two, I'm going to be reading the books by Graham Oppy and see those arguments. But those are definitely some books I would highly recommend. I hope that helps. And Benjamin, thank you for the super chat. Says, what do you think Jesus was doing during the lost years? Was he in India hanging out with the Brahmin? I know the Indian texts were forged. Okay, so this is a really good question. There were even people who believed he went east and studied with the Buddhists, which is why there's crossover with Jesus's teaching and the Buddhist teaching. I don't think that's likely, though. I think a lot of Jesus's teaching was already to be found in Judaism of that time period. So I think we can account for that way. 1 second, though. I'm going to find a book. Although, for anyone looking, here is the Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy, if you want to know what it looks like. But there's another short little book that I really enjoy. I don't know where I put it, but it condensed down. It has some of the early writings about Jesus from the people that were doing public disputations. So like between Celsus and Porphyry and Julian and whatnot. And I like Celsus's theory, and it was not just his own theory, but I think Celsus was right. I think Jesus did go into Egypt. I think that's why the Gospel of Matthew shows him going into Egypt. I think a lot of people believe this or knew this about Jesus, that he went into Egypt for some time period. I think he did his formative years in Egypt. I think most likely, according to Celsus, he learned magic while he was there. The reason why he went there was because his mother had an illegitimate son, and she had to run away and not get stoned for committing adultery. So they probably went there. He learned the magic, the dark arts of the Egyptians, came back and did a bunch of parlor tricks, believing or convincing people to believe that he is the Messiah based on a bunch of really bad parlor tricks, similar to what we find in like the history of Simon Magus. And that's what I think he did. That's my guess, but I could be wrong. Also, Gunther, thank you for the super chat, says, would Christians better understand gender if told it is the identity of the soul? When the body and soul do not match, gender identity issues arise. Yeah, I don't know. so I've done this before where I've explained to them that, trans is very similar to like the Trinity, right? Like the Father theoretically is male, the Spirit is feminine, like Ruach in Hebrew is feminine, but technically Jesus is absolutely masculine, but the Father might not have any gender because he's a spirit. So like, I don't know, there's issues that abound there as well, but the way I explain the trans issue to most people is like I help them to understand that part of what goes into like sex and gender is our hormones, our chemical makeup. And I think a lot of people want to boil like the sex of a person down to just what's between your legs, but I think it's more difficult than that. For example, if you've ever known somebody who has both male and female genitalia, we would definitely say, oh, well, this is some kind of an exception because their biology doesn't match our two categories. Well, guess what? Mo- Most trans people, their biology doesn't match either. Like their chemical makeup inside is causing them to identify this particular way. It's just that you can't see it because it doesn't manifest in an outward appearance, but it's manifesting internally. You know what I mean? So it's still a biological situation. But that being said, there are some people who identify as being trans who don't necessarily share that biological makeup. It's just a decision that that they came upon, right? And to me, I think that's equally as valid. Like if you've decided to identify in a particular way as a particular gender, I think that's your right to do it. I don't think we should have to limit it to merely a biological situation, you know? Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I don't spend a lot of time on that topic because I feel like we've got good people in the science community that can explain it better than me. And I'm a big proponent of letting the experts be experts. And this is not an area that I'm an expert on. What I will say, though, is I support all people who choose or are identifying differently than myself. It'd be super hypocritical for me to think that like my preferred way of the way I identify myself is the way that all people have to identify themselves. That's like such a egotistical viewpoint to hold on to. Also, Katie Dotson says, debate, was Paul an incel or just impotent? Oh shit, I love this so much. I've talked to a few people about this. I think the last time I had this conversation was like a year ago, maybe with Hanji. And like everything we learn about Paul strikes me as an incel. Like, first of all, Paul was unmarried. Paul has no idea how relationships work. Paul literally thinks that husband and wife like owe sex to each other. Like it's a crazy setup for like, marital rape, trying to say that like you have to give in to the sexual desires of your spouse is like part of the duty. This reads like a guy who was an incel. That's what it reads like to me. For anyone who's wondering, if there is consent in marriage, yes, marriage, just like non-marriage, still revolves around consent. You can't just forcefully take your partner or take from your partner what you desire. It's still called rape, even if you're married. Also, Kevin, thank you for the super chat. It says, do you know Adam Green from No More News? Any thoughts? I don't actually. I don't know that channel. I've never even heard of it. Now I kind of want to look it up. I do know a really fun channel called Some More News with Cody Johnston. I love Some More News with Cody Johnston. It is hands down my favorite news channel. I love it. But No More News, I'm not familiar with this. I'm looking it up now. It looks like a movie. Is it a movie? It kind of looks like it is. It's got an IMDb page. I'll have to look into this. I'm not familiar with it, so I'm not sure I can share my thoughts, but I can say I'll definitely look into it. Also, keep in mind that studies have consistently proven that people who don't spend a lot of time in the news are consistently happier than people who do spend a lot of time in the news. So I do keep up with the news quite a bit, but I would also emphasize to anyone who's really into the news. Remember that your mental health is important. And if you overdose on news, it could be damaging to your mental health. So consume the news in moderation. Because remember, the news is designed to make you feel negatively. The news outlets have realized that giving people, like not forcing, but inhibiting people from feeling positive emotions and enticing them to feel negative emotions, keep them watching longer. So news stories are always negative and shocking because they want to elicit that emotional response from you, which is why people that are watching news all the time are just not as happy. But Larry, thank you so much for the 666. Hail Nero. He says, pretty work today, Justin. Well, Larry, I really appreciate it. Shit, Larry, you were watching us in the morning on Unapologetic. You were there for the AXP episode, and now you're here. Thank you so much for supporting me all day. I know it's been a hell of a long day, which is why I'm not going late. I'm done at 10 o'clock tonight. You know, I've got to get a little bit of sleep, but thank you so much for supporting. And for everyone else, there's so many people that support the community, the debate community, the deconstruction community, the atheist community, that like we couldn't do it with all your guys' support. We really, I want to make sure you guys understand how much we appreciate you guys, because without the community, it doesn't matter. We can get on a screen and talk to empty space and no one's going to watch. It's the people that are there, the people that are tuning in and commenting and sharing and engaging in the dialogue that really make it worthwhile. And Josie says, what's you email so I can ask something? Well, Josie, if you go to my YouTube page, under the bio, I don't know what they call it, you'll find my email address. It's justin@deconstructionzone.net. And you can definitely send me an email, or you can connect to the Discord. And you can find the Discord at tinyurl.com/DZ Discord. Or you can just go to the link tree in my profile and click on the Discord link in my link tree and find it there. So, but Big W, definitely, yeah, if you have a question, send it over. I'll try to give you the best answer I can. And Flanker420, good to see you, friend. Thank you so much for the super chat. It says, what's the difference between hard and light? It's a lot easier to fall asleep with a light on. Rock hard for Doug. Yeah, you're not going to fall asleep with a heart on. You might wake up with one. I don't know if you're going to fall asleep very well with one. Just make sure you don't roll over. That could be a bad experience. W for the joke, man. I appreciate that. And Frank Reynolds, amazing profile, by the way. Thank you for the 666. Says, being fully deconstructed feels amazing. Jerry Coyne is also a good author. Oh, I don't know Jerry Coyne. I'll have to check out Jerry. I've actually learned so many good books and authors from suggestions of people in the community that, like, man, I would love it if I had already known some of these resources when I was deconstructing. I feel like I just kind of did it on my own. Oh, I've seen this book before. Okay, so Sarah from Leaving Faith has this book, and I've actually been meaning to buy myself a copy of it. I just never have. But the book is called Why Evolution is True by Jerry Coyne. And now that you bring it up, I'm so glad that you reminded me of it. I'm going to put it in my cart right now. It looks like you can get the paperback for $9. I'm going to read this book. It's on my reading list now. Thank you so much for the suggestion, Frank Reynolds. I appreciate that. And Flanker, again, thank you for the super chat, says, do you worry about being an outspoken atheist in current political climate? It seems we are 2 steps away from it being a serious issue. So you're not wrong. I've had this conversation with Sarah and with a few others with this anti-Christian bias task force that's being put together. The current administration certainly is setting up a situation where they want to root people like me out. They want people like me to not exist. So that's why one of the reasons why I'm trying to stick more to like atheism in general rather than just against Christianity. Because remember, when I first started streaming, it was the opposite. I was just doing Christian deconstruction and I wasn't doing atheism generally. And then eventually I just started doing atheism in general. Well, I think that's probably going to be the course to take for the next 4 years during this administration, because like anyone who's just attacking Christianity is going to be labeled under the anti-Christian bias task force. So now my understanding is that, initially they're creating the task force to like get it out of like the governments or the schools or whatnot, right? But eventually it's going to make it into the public sphere. Eventually they're going to say this person speaking out publicly shouldn't be allowed to do it. And then we all know what happens there, right? It's amazing that the people that want to plant their flag in free speech, we need free speech, are now burning books and rooting people out who have dissenting opinions. It's crazy to me how you can have these free speech advocates doing what they're doing right now. But great question. I appreciate that. And Noah's Lions ate dead babies on the ark. Good to see you tonight, friend. It says, so David had the horny kind of dementias. Yeah, actually. He must have. Could you even imagine in modern times somebody being like suggesting to their family members, hey, I'm old and I know I'm like one leg already in the grave. Can you find me a young little hottie toddy to lay with me? I'm not going to sleep with her. I get cold. You know what I mean? Which is crazy. Like, were his wives all cold? Could they not climb into bed with him and keep him warm? He had like 15 of them. What was preventing David's wives from keeping him warm? Crazy to me. The story doesn't make any sense. You cannot convince me that David did not sleep with Abishag. And Dr. Pizza says, is the Gideon Bible any good? I stay in lots of hotels and have amassed 47 copies. They're okay. They're not bad. I want to say once upon a time, they used the KJV. But they don't anymore. Let me see what they're using. If you can get a Gideon's Bible that's no longer KJV, it looks like the newer ones, I think, are ESV, it looks like. So if you can get a newer one in the ESV, that's okay. But you guys know my feeling on the KJV. KJV is not good. It's not a good translation. It was okay for 1611, but it's not 1611 anymore. So if you got 47 copies of the KJV Bible, then just use them as fire starters. Douse them in a little bit of used motor oil. Let them soak, and then you use them as a fire starter. That's about all they're good for. And Brandon, thank you for the super chat. It says, why isn't it brought up more? How heaven would be, as Hitchin calls it, a celestial North Korea. Americans are against this in their bones, you'd think. So that's a good point. And we've had this conversation a little bit before about heaven, but we don't do it enough. I need to push this point, which is the idea that living eternally in heaven would be like awesome. I don't know. Like eventually you'll get bored of stuff to do. Because think about this, right? Theoretically, in heaven, there's no material existence. You're like all spirits, right? So what the hell are you doing up there? Are you playing chess? Are you doing games of backgammon or checkers? Like, what are you doing with your time? I don't understand. If you're just up there and it's just a bunch of like bodiless, spirits floating about, you're going to get bored real fast. You need to do something. They need to at least get like a good shuffleboard going on, or else I don't know what you're doing with yourself. And theoretically, there's no eating and drinking up there. Holy shit. This place sounds horrific. I would much rather go to hell where I have a body that can burn and maybe I can have, I don't know, a conversation with somebody else while they're burning alive and we can play a game or hopscotch or something, who knows. But at least in hell, there's material. In heaven, there's no material. And Chris says, technically, Eve was a trans clone of Adam. That's actually an interesting point. Let me think on that for a second. I mean, theoretically, you could say that Eve took some of the chromosomes from Adam and then God had to add different chromosomes to make Eve Eve. I don't know. There's some questions there. There are definitely some questions there, Chris. I'll have to think on that one. It's a good thought, though. And Vinny Angel's Rock and Roll Bedroom, good to see you tonight, my friend. Make sure you guys follow my friend on YouTube, Vinny. He does atheist music. And he says, another great atheist cookbook is Ken's Guide to the Bible by Ken Smith from 1995. Like Mark Twain, he uses humor to thoroughly roast both testaments. Praise Doug. Shit, I didn't know that about this book. Now I'm going to look it up. It's called Ken's Guide to the Bible. I'm so sad I don't know some of these references. It looks like it's been out for quite some time. You can get a copy for $15, brand new on Amazon, and it looks like they've got a copy, even on archive.org, that you can borrow. You can check out on archive.org. You can check out a copy of Ken's Guide to the Bible and read it for free. You just got to get an account with Archive and borrow it. So great suggestion. Big W for suggesting that, Vinny. I really appreciate that. And I'm curious to read it. It's on my list now. It's on my list. Good suggestion. Hammond Molek, thank you for the super chat, says, do you know anything about the Mormon secret second anointing? It's kind of weird that they hold this ritual secret from the general membership. In any case, what's your review of the Book of Mormon? So I've actually only read bits and pieces of the Book of Mormon. I'm shocked by how openly racist it is. Like in 2nd Nephi, I think chapter 5 and elsewhere, we get this nonsense about the people's skin being turned black as a curse. And you basically then you can tell the good people from the bad people because of their skin color. And he even talks about how these people that were cursed with the darker skin color became lazy and didn't work. Really common stereotypes of black people for the time period. Like just a super racist book, but they also just like make shit up, and they copy a lot of verses from the KJV. And sometimes they copy translation errors from the KJV, or there'll be spots in the KJV where like a word is in parentheses. Like we'll say the word was might be in parentheses because in biblical Hebrew, the states of being are sometimes implied. They're not actually in the text. They're implied by the text. So the KJV translators would add the state of being in the English translation and put it in parentheses, letting you know that this is not part of the actual text. This is just implied. And you'll find in the Book of Mormon, they could just copy that over into it. They don't even know what the KJV is doing, right? So it's bad. It's super shitty. I have a whole tab on the Deconstruction cheat sheet debunking Mormonism. So if you have access to the Deconstruction cheat sheet, definitely look at the tab for the LDS arguments and for the nonsensical view of the Hebrews that seems to be the undergirding resource for the Book of Mormon. It's crazy. The religion's wild. It's insane to me that anyone believes that this was real. And Joseph Smith himself was arrested, tried, and found guilty of extorting local farmers, claiming to use various magical methods like dowsing rods to find ancient buried treasures on their farm. The dude was not an honest person. He was a trickster. His goal was to go out tricking people, and he finally did. And the easiest way to trick people is with religion. And TMJ Hell, thank you for the $20 super chat. Big W, really appreciate that. Says, is tithing only for Levitical priests, widow and orphan, not the Christian pastor? It seems like tithe is used as a tool of fraud by the church. So kind of. So it seems to be something that you need for the priests. And so we even see it for non-Levitical priests. Like you'll see it for the tithe that was paid to the priest of Salem by Abraham in Genesis 14, right? So there's just this idea, both in the Old Testament and in the ancient world, where if you're receiving services from a priest, you have to pay them. You have to compensate them for their services. So the idea is biblical and it is pretty archaic. But this idea that the tithe is like a particular amount, like you must pay 10% or you're robbing God of God's money, that's not biblical at all. There's nothing in the Bible about that. In fact, most of the Bible, God seems to be of the opinion that he would want you to give money of your own free will and volition. That's why the free will offering was so important in the Old Testament. So this idea that like God's going to be upset, like the televangelists want you to believe, if you don't give a certain amount of your income as a tithe, that doesn't seem to be biblical at all. And it's also true that like even in the Levitical setup, the tithe was used to support the ministry, not to keep the ministers wealthy. In fact, God had chastised the priests quite openly in certain occasions, like in the book of Jeremiah, for what we're going to call fleecing the flock, for not actually tending to the flock, but for tending to themselves through dishonest gain. And so my opinion is that the Bible, this whole nonsense of tithing is not really biblical. Even though there is a principle of giving, the principle of giving is for the sustaining of the priesthood, not for anyone to be enriched. That's not the goal. And Kevin, again, with a super chat, says, No More News has a channel on Rumble. Oh, that makes more sense. And Odyssey. He makes the argument that Christianity is a psyop created by Jews. Yeah, as soon as he said Rumble, I was like, there's going to be some bullshit after this. Yeah, listen, anything you find on Rumble is going to be borderline, conspiracy theory. Rumble is for like the guys who were into Rush Limbaugh, but if you could mix Rush Limbaugh with a little bit more conspiracy theory, that's kind of the type of people you get on on Rumble. Rumble is just like one step above 4chan. Not much difference. Like if 4chan was a streaming platform, it would basically be Rumble at this point. So the fact that there's a news channel there called No More News that is doing conspiracy theories like psyop theories against the Jews is not surprising in the least. And Rumble is so right wing. The idea that they're also doing Jewish conspiracy theories is unsurprising. The amount of anti-Semitism on the right wing is abysmal. It's even crazier when the right wing is also the ones that will they'll get all up in arms if like you say something bad about the nation of Israel. Like they can't marry those two ideas. They can't figure out the difference between being against the government of Israel and also being anti-Semitic, being two different things. Anyways, Tyler says, hey, Justin, what are your 3 favorite movies? Do you have a favorite genre? So my favorite genre of movies are comedies. I love comedy movies. My other favorite genre of movies would be history, like documentaries. But one of my favorite movies of all time is Major League. It's a baseball movie. It's a comedy about my home team. And I think it's a great series and some great actors in it. Another great movie, I think, let me do some thinking on that. I'm going to disappoint a few people. I still really enjoy the 10 Commandments Charlton Heston film. I watch it every couple years. It's intriguing to me. It was one of the first movies I ever saw as a child, and I've seen it like 100 times. It's still just fun to watch. Other movies, like I really did enjoy the Lord of the Rings series. Let me think. I used to really enjoy the John Candy movies. He died too young. Makes me quite sad. I love some of the great comedy movies of the 70s and 80s. Like the Richard Pryor films and whatnot. Such really good films. Can I pick 3 favorites? I don't know. Monty Python, number 2, The Life of Brian. So number 1 was going to be, what did I say for number 1? I already forgot. Anyways, number 2 is Monty Python, Life of Brian. And we'll say number 3 will go with 10 Commandments by Charlton Heston. Number 4, we'll say the entire catalog of John Candy movies. So I hope that helps. Great question, though. I appreciate that. All right, 1 second. Let me grab the next super chat. Jammin' J with the super chat. Big W Jammin' says, your lore helped me show Absalom to my Christian kid. Thank you. Oh, well, I'm glad. Listen, a lot of people don't fully know some of these obscure Bible stories, and there's a good reason. Because if you're a pastor, these are not the stories you want to preach on. These are not the stories you want your kids to know about. These are not the things that you're going to preach about, right? And so, yeah, there's a reason why Christians don't know about these stories. But all you got to do is pick up the book and read it. But Jammin, thank you so much for letting me know. I'm so glad that you're able to use one of my arguments against the God of the Bible. And Bill, thank you so much, says, have you ever done a show with Matt Dillahunty? That would be interesting. I haven't yet. I think I'll be able to get the opportunity to. I've been on the line once. I was with the Godless Engineer, John Gleason. He's an awesome guy, but I haven't been on the line yet. They do have me on their list of like backup hosts if they ever need one. But the line is a little bit different. It's not organized by a central board. Like the individual hosts of the line get to pick who they co-host with. So it's just one of those things where eventually you have to like, find the right person who's already a host that will co-host you. So I don't know, but I'd love to get on a screen with Matt Dillahunty. I think it'd have to be like a good cop, bad cop situation where he was the bad cop, I was a good cop. I know I spend a lot of time being the bad cop, but you can't really have two bad cops on a debate. So I'd have to move aside and let him be the bad cop. You know what I mean? And Mr. Deity, thank you for the 777, says, big fan. I have a video coming out tomorrow, and it's all about your channel and what you do. Got to have you in Mr. Deity episode. Well, Mr. Deity, I appreciate you doing an episode about me. Most videos that people do about me are not necessarily good. Typically, they want to like tear me apart. Rather than make glowing videos about me. And I'm assuming that you might be one of those because you've got 777 in your profile. And I've never heard of Mr. Deity yet, which means I don't know if you're part of our community. So now I have to actually look for Mr. Deity on YouTube and see if you're a member of our community or if you are not a member of our community. Let me see. I see Mr. Deity on YouTube, and let's see what it says. God will not be mocked, or will he? Oh shit. This might be a good channel now that I'm looking at it. I'm subscribing. Let's see what it says. Is there a bio in here? I don't see a bio. Major announcement. I'm leaving atheism. Oh boy. This should be fun. Let's see what the videos are about. I feel like this whole channel is going to be satire. The values of the West, invested in Jesus, deconverting Christians, absurdity of life with Jesus, the sin of empathy. Okay. All right. Just watching it, I don't really know what the channel's about because you're saying Alex O'Connor is gaslighting people. And it seems like you think Richard Hitchens is gaslighting people. But you're also railing against popular apologists. So I have no idea where this channel is at, but I already subscribed, so it's too late. It looks like your videos will be popping up and I'll have to be watching them. But either way, hey, W for the safety chat, and I'll be looking forward to your Mr. Deity video coming out. It sounds like you're just roasting everybody. If I had to take a guess, you're roasting everybody on both sides of the aisle, which is fine. Hammond says, there really should be a critical commentary series on the Quran. There is a critical commentary. Oxford makes one. Give me a second. It's the Oxford Annotated Quran. Isn't that what it's called? There is an annotated Quran. Give me a second. You could also go to the Quran.com and read like a bunch of the tafsirs. That would be a good way to do it. Let's see. This is an annotated translation of the Quran. So this is by A.J. Droge, and it's the Quran, a new translation, or new annotated translation. So I don't think that's really providing commentary on it. I think it's just commentary on the translation itself. But I know somebody makes an annotated Quran. I know it exists. I thought Oxford made it. Let me see what the Oxford book says in the description. If my screen will load. All right, so it's the Quran translated by M.A.S. Abel Halim. by the Oxford World Classics. It says a major new translation, blah, 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 translation. No, it doesn't look like there's any commentary. There is a little bit of commentary in it. So it says it provides notes that explain geographical, historical, and personal allusions and cross-referencing within the Quran. And it says it includes an index that arranges Quranic material into topics for easy interest. So there's a little bit of annotation in the Oxford edition. That's probably what I would go with to start. But again, I'm not an expert in the Quran. There probably is a good resource that I'm unaware of. But certainly a worthwhile read. Good question. And Johanna, thank you for the super chat. It says, what's so great about heaven? I certainly don't want to hang out with a bunch of goody two-shoes for eternity. Yeah, I agree. Heaven to me kind of sounds boring. I get it. Like if your only option is to be dead forever or to be alive forever in heaven, like I get why you would choose heaven. Or if the other option is being eternally tormented by flames, I get it. I know why you would choose heaven. That makes sense. But just from a critical thinking standpoint, the idea that you're just going to exist forever in the clouds with just other spirit beings, not really doing anything. You can't go for a bike ride. I don't know. It just kind of sounds boring. All firsthand. Thank you for the super chat. It says KJV popular because it's hard to understand. Maybe. Here's my theory. I think there are two reasons why the KJV is popular. I think people like the older editions of things. Like they just think that because it's older, it's better, it's more original, it's closer to the source. The other thing that I think people do is they get used to the way a sacred text sounds. Like when you're talking King James, it sounds Bible-y. They've come to associate that language with holy language, right? And so for a lot of people, like my mother said this once, when I read the KJV, it just sounds like the Bible. It sounds more authoritative because that's how she learned. You know what I mean? So I get that. And I'll tell you a quick story. So a lot of people, they just get used to the way things are. And I've told people this story before, but I had a friend who was a pastor at a Lutheran church, and the Lutherans wear robes. Well, they started a second service, a contemporary service. And for the first year or two, he wore the robe even in the contemporary service. And eventually he's like, this is a contemporary service. Why am I wearing a robe? He's like, I'm just going to wear a suit. So he stopped wearing the robe for the second service, and people left the church over this man not wearing a robe. I'm kid you not. People left the church over a man not wearing a robe because people's minds, when it comes to sacredness, they just associate all the stuff that they're used to. You need that for it to be sacred, but they're not. That doesn't make things sacred. Meg, thank you so much for the super chat. Good to see you, Meg. Meg says Jesus was trans. Parthenogenesis. Oh, such a good point. Parthenogenesis. So a female clone of Mary dressed and looked like a man. Get with it, Christians. 100%. Jesus had no chromosomes from a man. He received no DNA, nothing from a man. It all came from Mary. All of his genetic material came from Mary, even though he presented as a man. I could only assume that Jesus was trans. In fact, Meg, I'm glad you mentioned this. If you go to the gift shop in our Discord, you'll find a coffee mug that says Jesus was trans. I got that coffee mug. I love it. It's a great coffee mug. I recommend it to anyone who wants a Jesus is trans coffee mug. The image on it is delightful. And Johanna again says, did you just say there's no food in heaven? Well, that sounds like hell to me. Count me out. That's what I said, Johanna. And you're right. Jesus said there would be no eating and drinking in heaven. Just like there would be no marrying in heaven. And so let's see, I get the verse. Let's see. Was it Luke 22? Oh no, I might be wrong. I might be adding to that. Let me double check. There might be eating and drinking in heaven. Actually, there's no marrying though. There's no marrying in heaven. I may have misremembered that verse. Let's see. Truly I tell you, yeah, because Jesus himself says, "Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." That seems to suggest the renewed heaven and new earth will have at least drinking, right? Let's see. But I was looking for that one verse where the Pharisees challenge him on marriage. Yeah, this is really interesting now. The verse I was thinking of is Matthew 22, verse 30. So let me go to Matthew 22, because I may have been misremembering the eating and the drinking stuff. So it says here, Jesus says, you are wrong because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection, people neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. Well, that could be taken either way, because there is one verse in the Psalms that seems to suggest that the angels in heaven have bread, they have manna. It talks about how the manna that fell from heaven in the Exodus was the bread of the angels. It says, as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, so on and so forth. Okay, so Jesus didn't address eating and drinking here. I don't know why my brain inserted eating and drinking in there. It wasn't in there. My brain had a slip. I don't know if that is like me mixing another verse in with that accidentally, but guys, there could be eating and drinking in heaven. Interesting thought. But that brings up a really good question, which is, if that's the case, then the typical Christian idea of heaven is not what Christians think it is. It'd be more akin to what the Jewish people think heaven is. Heaven in the Jewish sense is just a renewed heaven, like skies, and a renewed earth. And then you're back here on earth doing earthly things. You're just not dying anymore. That's the Jewish conception. And I would argue that it shows up in the New Testament as well, as long as you're looking for it. But the typical modern Western Christian conception of heaven is that you're like up in this celestial space that's like outside of space and time. And if that's what you think heaven is, I have a hard time believing that there's eating and drinking in heaven. But anyways, we should do a little bit of thinking on that. Let me see. There might be other verses that address it. Anyways, that's a good point. It's a good question. For now, I'm going to put a pin on that and say, based on some of the passages, it seems like there might be eating and drinking in heaven. Ham and Molech says, do you think ethnic nationalism existed longer than people generally talk about? The Bible, for example, is really nationalistic in the way it talks about the nations and Israel. It kind of is, and it's not unique. So, for example, if you read the writings of even the ancient Sumerians, they're very much into national pride, and the ancient Babylonians very much into national pride. And even the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The Neo-Assyrian Empire was so into national pride that they thought that their God commanded them to conquer the entire world through battle. Like, they believed that they were so special that the god of the Akkadians, Ashur, wanted them to every year go out and wage battle against all the people who don't worship Ashur as their god. And so that sense of national pride was like pretty ubiquitous in the ancient Near East. And I don't think the Bible is unique in that. But the Bible is unique in that, like, the Jewish people, I think, were more willing than other people. They were more willing than others to adhere to their sense of national pride. And I think one of the reasons for that is the long history of being subjugated people. Subjugated people quite often have a core that hold tightly to their nationalistic identity as a form of survival. But Chris says God used Abraham or Adam's rib to knock out his Y and double X. Let me make sure I understand this. God used Abraham's rib to knock out his Y and double X. I mean, I assume you're referring to the chromosome, but I don't know what the rib has to do with it. Somebody who's more versed in science might be able to help me understand this. Chris, I apologize. I may not understand what you're trying to communicate to me. But it is weird that I don't know, that women was just made from an accessory of the body rather than God saying, I'm going to go and create something completely cool and unique, especially because she's already kind of an afterthought, because in Genesis, she's not created until Adam goes through all the animals and can't find a suitable mate among the animals. Genesis chapter 2. He's rooting around through the animals trying to figure out if he can find a suitable mate among the animals. And then let me show you the passage, because it's crazy. It's crazy how it turns out. The Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner." So out of the ground, the Lord God formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was his name. So God originally created the animals to be a mate, a partner for Adam. And he just couldn't find one. The man gave names to all the cattle, the birds of the air, and to every animal of the field. But for the man, there was not found a helper as his partner. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man. So it wasn't until Adam couldn't find a partner among the animals that God was like, oh shit, I gotta go to plan B. Got to create something more akin, to being like Adam. Anyways, crazy story. And Bruce, thank you for the super chat. Says I think you mean you're going to love Mr. Deity. He says, you're going to love Mr. Deity. I fully endorse him. He's sent by Doug. Trust me. Well, Bruce, if Doug sent you and sent Deity, then I trust you. Yeah, I definitely would trust Doug. Don't be blaspheming Doug now. Don't be lying on Doug. But anyways, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. So I assume if he's a member of the atheist community, then probably you guys already know him and I don't. I'm actually kind of new on the atheist scene online. Like, I've been an atheist now for quite a few years, but I wasn't engaging in the atheist community. Hammond, again, with the super chat, though, thank you, says, thank you for the Quran recommendations. Well, Hammond, thank you so much for the support and for the questions. And I would also, if you're not following The Atheist Republic by Armin, who is an ex-Muslim, I definitely recommend it. He's an awesome resource. He knows way more than I would ever know. And my friend Ems on TikTok. Ems is a great resource for anti-Muslim rhetoric. And Chip has more to add from Mr. Deity. Thank you, Chip. He says, Mr. Deity is the Doug of anti-Christian satire. Oh, he's satire. I love satire. Okay, now I'm bored. You had me with satire. It says his satire is savage, his humor hilarious, and his insight incisive for 15 plus years on YouTube. Well, holy shit, Chip. I'm glad you filled me in on that. If there's one thing I love, it is satire. I love a good satire. Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned it. And Mr. Deity's clearing it up. He says, I might question the OG of YouTube atheism. You might be the OG of YouTube atheism. Mr. Deity and the Evil was shot nearly 19 years ago. We are brothers from another mother. Holy shit. I don't know who the Evil is either. I haven't been engaging with online atheism for a long time. So I'm the new kid on the block technically. So I've still got a lot of catching up to do. But Mr. Deity, I'm glad that you let me know. I already subscribed to your channel. It sounds like I'll be spending some time this week binge watching your videos, because as I've already mentioned, I love a good satire. I love it. Like all the stuff by Sacha Baron Cohen. I can't say his name right. I love it. I'm a big fan of satire. And see you in Monaco. Thank you for the super chat. It says, Justin, thank you so much for setting me free from the Christian cult. Well, Monaco, thank you so much for letting me know. I do appreciate when people let me know that like my work here is valued. Like I'm actually making headway in the work. I want people to be freed from these toxic religions. I don't think they're good for humanity. Like, I'm not doing this just for fun. Like, a lot of times it's not fun. Like, I'm doing this because I think that this is going to achieve some movement in society, that it brings about some kind of a good outcome. You know what I mean? And Tullius, thank you for the super chat, says they always prophesy in KJV speak in Pentecostal services because God spoke Old English. I know it. They always do. When you're speaking for God in the Pentecostal services, you got to use KJV speak. It's always more authoritative when you use KJV. It's so authoritative that's why the Book of Mormon is all worded in Old English. If you read the Book of Mormon, listen, it was written just prior to the Civil War. But it was written in 1600s, like 1600s English. Why? They didn't speak like that in the middle of the 1800s. Why are you doing that? Because it sounds more authoritative. That's why. Also, Marcus, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Marcus says, I'm trying to convince a Christian friend that the serpent in Genesis isn't Satan, just a talking snake. Do you know where this idea was Satan Lucifer comes from? So kind of comes from the book of Revelation, right? So there's a quotation in the book of Revelation that talks about the ancient serpent. I'll grab you the verse. Now, I think personally that it probably is hearkening back to a quote from Isaiah, like Isaiah, was it 29 or something like that? I'm going to look at it later, but there we go. Revelation 12:9 is the one I was looking for. And it talks about this beast, or this evil entity. And it says the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Now the problem with this is, like, this is not in the Old Testament. There's no episode in the Old Testament of Satan being cast down to the earth with the angels with him. This mythology comes from extra biblical literature, primarily, probably, honestly, a combination of the Old Testament and the Book of Enoch, and some of the extra biblical literature of the Enochic flavor. But there certainly was a connection of Satan being akin to the serpent in Genesis within Judaism, but it wasn't really from the Bible. Like they had to, because initially Satan was invented later. The Satan figure came much later, and eventually they had to figure out, well, if we have this talking serpent doing evil stuff and serpents can't talk, then how is this happening? And then they developed the theology of, well, it must be Satan posing as a serpent. But the original story of Genesis wasn't so. The original story of Genesis was an etiology to explain why snakes don't have legs, why they're cursed to live in the ground and eat the dirt of the ground and to crawl on their bellies. It's an explanation for why snakes out of the animal kingdom have this unique existence. But later Jewish readers and authors had a different idea. Once, they already went through the Babylonian captivity and the Persian period, and they introduced this character of Satan into the Old Testament. They had to now take these narratives and find a home for them. But I think if you're reading Genesis as it was written, it was not about Satan. No way. And you can even read in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we've got parallels where snakes are robbing mankind of their immortality. Like in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he dives down through the sea of death and gets the plant of immortality that he was told by Utnapishtim. And as he's resting on the shore of the water, a serpent comes up and takes the plant of immortality from him. The snake wasn't a personified evil. The snake wasn't being possessed by a spirit in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's just a serpent. It's just a trickster, and we find the same thing in the Bible. We don't have to posit a Satan figure. And Frimples sending out 5 Deconstruction Zone memberships. Thank you so much, Frimples. I really appreciate that. And everyone who's got a Kraken Crew Elite membership, remember that you've got access to the Deconstruction cheat sheet. And definitely make use of the cheat sheet, friends. Katie Dotson, thank you for the super chat, says, so Jesus was a trans Nephilim. This just keeps getting better. Actually, you nailed it. The idea of a Nephilim is when a divine entity mates with mankind, which exactly is what Jesus was. So Jesus was a trans Nephilim, which is why it gets worse. This is why Jesus had to die. Jesus didn't die for your sins. He died for his sins. Because if Jesus is God and Mary was already betrothed to Joseph, then God broke two laws. He committed incest by having sex with his own mother, and he committed the adultery by having sex with another man's wife. Both of those things should have resulted in him being executed. So God had to kill himself to pay for his own sins for what he did to Mary. And so he's not just a trans Nephilim, he's a trans Nephilim who's also incest and an adulterer. He's an adulterous, incest, trans Nephilim. So mark that one down for Jesus, a trans Nephilim, incest, adulterer. Crazy to think about. And Johanna says, thank you so much for the super chat, so Johanna. Says, so maybe there's food and drink, alcoholic, but no sex. Bummer. Yeah, no sex. And certainly might be some wine up there. I'm not sure how you're going to age, like how you're going to get wine, though, because in order for wine to exist, you need wild yeast. Like that's how the process works. It doesn't ferment on its own. You need yeast. And now we're introducing bacteria. Well, if there's bacteria in heaven, it seems like we're going to be introducing the negative bacteria eventually, like the kind that cause yeast infections. So I don't know. There's some plot holes in this whole narrative. You know what I mean? It doesn't all make sense. But we're going to listen. We'll do what we can. We'll make as much sense of it as we can. And Mammoth, again, thank you so much for the super chat, Mammoth. He says, it's kind of weird that the Islamic version of heaven is really hedonistic. They're indulging in what would be considered as sin in this world. That's actually a really good point. This idea that you would just be gifted all these virgins, and like at some point you're like bathing in rivers of milk. Isn't that in there? Hold on. Milk or honey in the Quran. Yeah, there's like rivers of milk and honey. It's Surah Muhammad. Let's see, what number is this? 4715 is the number. The description, let me move this. I'll put it on the screen. Oh, there we go. The description of paradise promised to the righteous is that in it are rivers of fresh water, rivers of milk that never change in taste, rivers of wine, delicious to drink, and rivers of pure honey. There will also be all kinds of fruit and forgiveness from their Lord. They can be like those who will stay in the fire forever, left to drink boiling water that will tear apart their insides. Crazy. So for the good people, you get rivers of milk and honey, and theoretically many virgins. And for the wicked, you're going to not get forgiveness. You're going to be set on fire and drink boiling water. Crazy. But remember, Allah is most merciful, guys. Allah is merciful. Hell's an act of mercy. Crazy that they can say that kind of nonsense. These are not merciful deities. Chris, thank you for the super chat. It says Adam's rib only has Adam's DNA. Drop Y, double his X. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. So yeah, because Adam's rib contains the DNA of only Adam, you're not getting the additional chromosome that he needs, or partial chromosome. So that's a fair point. Like there's so many problems in the Jesus God narrative in terms of gendering God, that it's crazy to me that Christians and believers will insist that God is a male. Like we've had this conversation before where they're insisting that God is masculine because of all of his masculine pronouns, but he's not. He's just, the description we have of God in the Bible is that he's genderless, but he takes masculine pronouns anyways, which means the God of the Bible is a they, them. There's no way around it. God of the Bible is a they, them. And especially if you believe in a Trinity, because it's more than one. There's just no way around it. Hugh Pure says, did Adam have nips? It would be weird for God to give Adam a pair before women existed. Yeah, not only that, why would they have nipples to begin with anyways? Because they don't need to lactate. That's an unnecessary thing. Although we know that some men can lactate. But like even so, like what would there's so many weird questions. Like we already touched on the topic like of the animals being created as mates rather than the women initially. But like presumably Adam was born with a penis. So did God know ahead of time that he wouldn't be using the penis on the animals? Or did he not know? Did God think when he created the animals that the penis that he gave Adam would have to be inserted in like, the sheep? Was that his idea? Because otherwise, the story should read that when he created Eve, he also gave Adam a penis. Unless he's doing some kind of weird trickery. I don't know. There's so many plot holes that you have to plug when you're reading this book. And Hand of Omega says, best arguments against tithing for those in my life who are bankrupting themselves. Does the Bible really demand this? No, not at all, Omega. In fact, we were just talking about this earlier. The Bible does not demand tithing. There is a principle that you should be supporting the priests, the ministers. There's the principle that you should not be cheating them out of their portion, which is just what they need to sustain themselves. But like even in the Old Testament, the Levites weren't even given a tribal allotment. They had to go and find places to live among the other tribes. They weren't even allowed to have tribal allotments. So like God was not about this life where the Levitical priests were going to be living high on the hog. That wasn't a thing. They lived modest lives similar to Catholic priests. But the difference is the Catholic Church wanted you to tithe. They really wanted you to tithe, right? Your soul depended on it for some churches. But that's not in the Bible. There's nothing in the Bible that suggests that God is going to be mad at you if you don't tithe. In fact, in the Exodus, when he's building the tabernacle, the first offering they take is an offering of free will. It says, anyone who doesn't feel compelled, don't give. Only give to the building of the tabernacle if it's like laid on your heart, like if you're compelled to do it. And this seems to be the intention of the God of at least of the Hebrew Bible, and perhaps even of the New Testament, that, you're giving of your own volition. In the New Testament, even when Ananias and Sapphira are killed by Peter for deceiving Peter about how much of their property they sold for the poor and to give to the church, they weren't executed because they didn't give everything. They were executed because they lied. Like, it just seems to be that, the church and this idea of tithing is manufactured. Plus, the New Testament church that we have, if you're saying that's the example, the New Testament church suggests that you should give everything to the wider authoritative church body, and essentially, live in a commune of some nature, and basically resort to like socialism, even communism maybe. So like, if you really want to talk about what the Bible has to say about money, it seems to suggest that you should be endorsing communism or socialism, probably socialism. And Nick, thank you for the super chat. It says, why would an all-powerful deity need to impregnate a human in order to take human form? So this is such a good point, right? Because even like the figure of Melchizedek was a person in history that the Jews believed would manifest from spirit form to physical form at various points in history. I would look at the Melchizedek scroll from the Dead Sea Scrolls, or the writings about Melchizedek that you'll find in the books of Enoch. So like, we know already from Jewish lore that a spirit can just manifest in human form. You don't have to like impregnate anybody for it to happen. And so like, I don't know, it's weird that you have this impregnating situation, right? It makes you wonder what did it serve? Because would it not be more typical just to conclude that God manifested on earth and here's the proof of it? What it seems to me is like they're probably just trying to parallel the ancient Roman mythologies or the Greek mythologies, where you have all these demigods, these half god, half men, right? it might just be a sign of the time. They needed another demigod. They could understand a demigod, so the story was written as a demigod. And let me get the last couple of super chats, guys. Don't send any more super chats. I gotta start getting ready to end the stream. I can't stay up late tonight. I've got to be up early in the morning. But thank you so much for being here. I'm going to keep going through the super chats that we have, though. And Hammond says, "Is Abraham and Sarah's incestuous relationship a possible parallel for the incestuous relationship the gods have?" That's a really interesting one, because the God of the Bible has no problem with incest until you get to like Leviticus, right? And it's not entirely clear that it's for full siblings. It might be that half siblings or quarter siblings might get a pass. But it is weird that we get conflicting information. Like, God blessed Abraham, despite the fact that Abraham was practicing incest. And then later he outlaws incest. Well, like, it's weird that, like, if incest is bad, then why would you use it for so long? Like, why would that be your mode of populating the earth? If it's not bad, then why would you outlaw it? Right? Like, or I know Christians will say, well, it was bad, but he had to allow it for a time period to populate the earth. Okay. Well, he didn't have to allow it. He's all powerful. He could have just created more humans, and then the more humans could have populated the earth. You see what I'm saying? Like, anytime you go to God has to do something, you're now limiting God's power. And Godless Doctor, thank you for the super chat, says, "My deity rocks. Thank you for doing the Lord's work." Well, thank you so much, Godless Doctor. I appreciate that. And Doug does rock. And Doug will rock your world. Always stay rock hard for Doug. Never be flaccid for Doug, friends. And Crafty, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Crafty says, "Jerry Cohen's books are good. Sadly, he's been drinking the turf's anti-science flavor aid, along with R. Dawkins and S. Pinker. Atheism needs skeptics. Oh no." Well, unfortunately, I get that. I actually have a good atheist friend who doesn't believe in evolution. It's sad. It pains me. It pains me to know that there are atheists that don't believe in science, but I get it. Like, if you're a skeptic, you might say, well, maybe I should even be skeptical of science. And I guess there's a place for that. But I don't know. I think some of the science that we have now seems pretty conclusive. It seems that maybe people just aren't familiar with the scientific evidence that we have at our disposal. Benjamin Xavier, thank you for the super chat. It says, "The evolution of religion is interesting. From the weather to animals, what's the deal with the worship of large rocks and graves?" So this is actually a really good question. And I don't think people talk about it enough, but we should talk about this. There's this idea in the ancient world, and you find it even in the Bible, where they're chastising other religions, saying that they worship rocks and sticks. Not true. So in the ancient world, they believed that you could create an icon, and then through an act of ritual, you could allow your deity or entice your deity to come and inhabit that object that you created. They didn't believe that the object itself was a god. They believed that the presence of your God could come and inhabit that. And I think maybe the two best evidence of this, of the ancient world, and you can look them up on the internet and read them. One is called the mouth opening ceremony. And this was practiced in Babylon, in Egypt, where they would carve out this idol for their god. They would take it down to the river. They would do this elaborate ritual, and they would cleanse it, of all of its impurity, make sure it was perfectly pure. And then they would do this elaborate ritual to induce the god coming down from heaven to inhabit the idol. And then they would, hold a worship for the god as it inhabited the idol. Another good example of this is called the ritual. The ritual for setting up a second temple for the goddess of the night. And you'll find this in the Context of Scripture series. Let me see if I can find a copy of it. So it's a long ritual, and so I'll say that now. The setting up of the goddess of the night, which I believe is a Hittite, but also existed in Hurrian literature. It's an elaborate ritual. It takes a while to read through it. I can't find a copy of it on the internet, but I can tell you which context of scripture you want to turn to, which part of the context of scripture in that volume series you want to turn to for setting up the ritual of the goddess of the night. But it's a really elaborate ritual that kind of helps you to understand, what was happening in the mind of the ancient people. Let's see. Yeah, I cannot seem to find a copy of it outside of the context of scripture. It seems like the only way to get a hold of it is probably through the context of scripture. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I can't seem to find a copy of it. Anyways, I'm going to show you real quick, though, in the context of scripture, where you can find it. It's going to be in volume number 1. I remember that much. And let's go to the index. We're going to go to Hittite canonical compositions. I think we want the divine compositions under rituals. And let's see what we have here under the rituals. Let's see, a ritual for prayer to Ishtar of Nineveh, soldier's oath, ritual between the pieces. Nope, not there. Maybe under incantations. Yeah, there we go. All right, so I'm going to see if I can put this on the screen. It's going to be context of scripture, section 1.70. And I'm going to Google this real quick to see if it shows up anywhere on the internet. Let's see now. Yeah, I just don't think it exists for free on the internet anywhere. But the title of the composition is called Establishing a New Temple for the Goddess of the Night. And if you email me, friends, if you send me an email or find me on the Discord, I'll send you a copy of this ritual so you can read it yourself. In fact, I've got a secondary channel that I haven't talked about in a while. And maybe I'll just do a full reading of it on my secondary channel. It's called Readings from the Ancient Near East is my secondary channel. Let me see. And I actually was lucky enough to get the handle on YouTube. I cannot believe somebody else didn't already have it, but I was able to get the handle, the Ancient Near East, on YouTube when I set up this channel. But I started it a while ago, and I kind of got distracted by other ventures. But I've got a bunch of readings on this channel from ancient Near Eastern compositions for people who don't have access to the same resources that I have access to. So you'll find like a lamentation for Tammuz, Ishtar's descent into the underworld. You'll even find like war annals on there. The legend of Sargon of Akkad is up there. And I've got different magic rituals and whatnot up on the channel. I'll do a reading of the setting up of the second temple for the goddess of the night, the Hittite ritual. I'll do a reading of that particular ritual, and I'll put it up on the channel for anyone who wants to listen to it but doesn't have access to my resources. So that's the one drawback to the academic resources is they cost money, and you have to invest money into getting the resources, right? Or else how else are you going to have them, right? But let me see. Great question, though. I appreciate that. Something definitely worth talking about. Gem and Jay says, how did Christians turn the other cheek into Ermagerd? I need I need me an assert reflex waff. Wait, weefa burp stirk immaturk. Did Jesus expound on passive action? Oh shit. So here's my understanding is that most Christians just don't read the Bible. They don't read it, right? And so the Christians that are so pro-violence, these are Christians that don't know the Bible and they don't care what's in the Bible. Real Christians are pacifists. And like I've got an aunt. My aunt is the most Christian person I've ever met. And she's delightful. And she's getting up in age and she lives alone. And her neighbor was trying to convince her that she needed a gun for protection. And she's like, why? She's like, well, what if somebody breaks into your house and wants to steal your stuff? She's like, fuck, take it. What am I doing with it? You know, if God thinks I don't need it, let them take it. Right. And then they're like, well, what if they want to do harm to you? What if they kill you? She's like, I don't care. I'll die and go to heaven. It's like, again, why do I need a gun? I have no need for it. And so, like, to me, this is the real Christian position. The real Christian position should be turn the other cheek. The real Christian position should be, if I die, I go to heaven. That's the actual Christian position. This is the position that was adopted by the early Protestants, like the Anabaptists and the Waldens, and like the Mennonites, and a lot of people that came out of that movement. They really took this to heart. And in fact, I would recommend reading from the Martyr's Mirror, also known as the Bloody Theater, about how they put this into action, how so many of these early Protestants that were pacifists were willing to give their lives for the sake of the gospel without a fight. And they didn't even believe in military service. They believed that you should, as Christians, you shouldn't join the military. You shouldn't join the government. You should be complete pacifists. Frimples, thank you for the $10 super chat. It says, Justin, you are more than catching up. Your content is much needed, and you are a new superpower in the fight against obsolete beliefs and superstitions. Keep up the fantastic work. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Frimples. I really appreciate that. You know, when I first got on social media, I wasn't sure how I would fit into the landscape, but I knew one thing. I was like, I know the Bible. That's one thing I can talk about. I can talk about this book. And I had really good advice from my youth pastor when I was young on, like, the first time I ever gave a sermon. He said, just talk about what you know. And so when I got on social media, I was like, I'm just going to talk about the thing that I know. And I know the Bible, and I know that shit's not true. And so that's what I've been doing. And it looks like I kind of carved out a niche for myself. So I'm super happy to have so many people that support my work. And I'm super happy that I'm able to, like, make an impact in the landscape of ideas. So, but thank you so much for that, Frimples. I appreciate the kind words. And Meg, thank you again for the super chat. It says, poof, Jesus turned water into wine. Yeast? Nah. Bacteria? Hell nah. That's a really good point, Meg. If there's if there's wine in heaven, we could just presume that it's not from natural yeast production. It's from Jesus turning water into wine. It's from this whole Dionysus nonsense. That's a fair point, Meg. I actually appreciate that. And Asian says, hey, Justin, I don't remember the verse in the book of Revelation about the tattoo or seal of God's servants. Is it in heaven? So it kind of seems to be that it's a precursor to going to heaven, because we find that in Revelation 13 or 14, after it talks about the mark of the beast, it talks about the mark that people receive that follow the Lord, right? And so let me grab that real quick. So after you get through the narrative of the second beast, I believe in chapter 14, we hear about the other marks. Let me grab. Yeah, so it says after that, then I looked, and there was a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. It's still, guys, I'll never get over it. I will never get over how the Bible can say things like this. His name and the name of his father, Jesus' name and the name of Jesus' father, and then have the gall to turn around and say that Jesus and the Father are one. They're actually the same. There's only one God. Do not fucking gaslight me. If Jesus's father is up in heaven and they have two different names, two different minds, they are two different gods at best. There's no such thing as the Trinity. It's nonsense. Anyways, I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of the harpists playing on their harps, and they sang a new song before the throne. Isn't it crazy that whenever this heavenly music is going to come about, they're going to be using instruments that are like no longer in practice? Are you fucking telling me that when we go to heaven, there's going to be people playing harps, but not a Casio keyboard? There's nobody on the synth? You want me to fucking believe in heaven there's no Casio keyboard, no synthesizer, no electric guitar? You can't do it. You haven't convinced me. I'm not going to heaven and listening to a bunch of people play on instruments that were obsolete 2,000 years ago. I don't think so. That's not my kind of music. Anyways, good question, Asian. I appreciate that. And my conscience says, you've definitely impacted my life in a positive way. Well, thank you so much, my conscience. I really do appreciate that. And my goal is to constantly get better. That's my goal. I want to get better and better and better at this, at this debate space and doing what I do, because I think people are listening. I think people are changing their thoughts, And Carlos, again, sending out more gifted memberships. Thank you so much, Carlos. I really appreciate that. Big W, Carlos. It's very generous of you. And also, we've got a member in the house for 4 months, Gymnasty, a 4-month membership. Thank you so much. Says, were Michael and Gabriel referred to as sons of God? If so, then why is Jesus also given that same title, but is God himself? Confusion. So this is actually a really good point, because the angels, right, are technically sons of God, and they are gods, right? In the book of Revelation, in the book of Daniel, chapter 3, right? If you go to Daniel 3, the one that shows up inside of the fire. This is going to blow your guys' mind. This is such a good question, by the way. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Let's see. It's near the end. I know I always miss it because it's not when I'm using the internet. It's in 3 though. I'll just Google it. $325. Eventually my brain is going to remember $325. Okay, so in the fiery furnace episode, we have this. First of all, I think Daniel is about the archangels, not about a Messiah. According to the book of Daniel, the one in Daniel 7 that receives all power and authority has got to be Michael the archangel. But in the fiery furnace, it says, he replied, I see 4 men unbound walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the 4th has the appearance of a god. Some translations say like the son of a god, but that's actually more true to the text. So if you go to Daniel 3:25, in the Hebrew, what you'll find is, if I remember correctly, it says one like the son of the gods, or like the son of God. And I don't know why my favorite Hebrew website isn't showing up, but I'll probably find it here on Sefaria. They translate it as looks like a divine being on Sefaria, but it actually says like this. Oh, what just happened? Why did my browser do this? All right, sorry, Sefaria was a bad idea, apparently. We'll use Blue Letter Bible then, or Bible Hub. All right, so walking around, the 4th is like, and then we've got Lebar, and bar is Aramaic Hebrew for son. We were used to hearing the phrase B'nai sons, or bane for son in the singular. In the late stages of Hebrew, when we're already now in the Aramaic phase, you hear son as bar. You might think of like Barabbas from the New Testament. Bar was the way they said son, not bane, during this time period. But he says, the son or a son, Elohim, of God, or gods, or the gods, depending how you want to translate it. So the way Daniel actually reads is that the person in the fiery furnace is like an angel, like a son of God. And that's what the sons of God gets translated to. Elsewhere in the Bible, the sons of God, when you read angels in the Greek text, a lot of times in the Greek Septuagint, they translated sons of God as angels. Like in the book of Job, the sons of God. Elsewhere, the sons of God are angels, right? So when I'm reading the book of Daniel, I'm reading the one in the fiery furnace is a son of God, an angel, which is why in the same chapter, in Daniel chapter 3, that same entity is described as an angel. Just a couple verses later, it says, let me pull it up, a couple verses later, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him." So to me, the angel and the Son of God is the same entity. And the other angels, like Gabriel, the way Gabriel shows up in the book of Daniel, Gabriel keeps showing up as a man. In fact, in chapter 9, he's called Gabriel the man, which is interesting because in Daniel chapter 7, we have this one who is like the Son of Man, coming on the clouds of heaven like an angel. Because the Son of Man, one like the Son of Man, the angel called man, and the straight up angel reference are all referring to the same entity. It's referring to Michael the Archangel. And at the very end of the book of Daniel, who comes to the rescue? Who's the one in the book of Daniel that's doing the thing that you would expect of the Messiah? It's Michael the Archangel, the great prince. That's why it says, at that time, got to move this again. I got too much stuff. At that time, Michael, the great prince, the protector of your people, shall arise, and there shall be a time of anguish. Well, if you read about this episode in the Dead Sea Scrolls, roughly about the same time as Daniel, this archangel is going to come back and rescue all of the Israelites. The sons of light are going to make war against the sons of darkness, and the sons of light are going to win. And that's with the guidance of Michael the Archangel. He's going to come in and be the savior. It's not this Jesus Messiah figure. No one's dying and rising for sins. None of them need to. Anyways, good question though. I appreciate the question. And as I was answering that, I got 2 more super chats. The last 2 super chats. Don't send any more, guys. Let me get these last 2 super chats done, and I got to go to bed, unfortunately. Sorry, I can't stay up late. El Colto says, it's a shame that we never get to see atheist Justin versus Christian Justin in a debate. Wait, let me make sure. You never get to see Christian Justin versus atheist Justin in a debate. I would say, though, when I debated as a Christian, I was less solidified in my opinions, and I was always willing to be wrong because I knew inherently that my belief system was based on faith and not on fact. And I was okay with that fact, that it wasn't a fact, it was a faith. And now I thought that I had pieces of evidence here and there that could move the needle in that direction. You see what I'm saying? But I was aware that my position as a Christian lacked a really good factual foundation. And so I went into my discourse with that understanding that there's a lot of arguments that I don't have the answers to, that I have to rely on faith. But once you get to the point where you're not making those concessions and you're just asking yourself, well, what is true? What can I know is true? Then faith gets easily left behind. But you're right. Those would be interesting conversations. I wonder how spicy they would get. Probably maybe pretty spicy at times. Last super chat, Pimpin Longbottom W for the name, great name. Thank you so much for the 1999 super chat. Says, hey Justin, your debate clips are like crack to me. I keep rewatching that Hadassah debate. Crazy shit. Which apologist would you want to debate the most in the future? First of all, I love the Hadassah clip. It's a delight. It's a delight. Oh my gosh. But which apologist would I want to debate? That's a hard question because, I never got into debating because I wanted to debate. Like I never dreamed of myself of like debating all the apologists, right? It just kept happening because I wanted to have deconstruction talks and people just wanted to debate me. Christians didn't want to talk. They just wanted to debate. So finally I was like, fuck it, we'll just debate. So like, it was never my intent to like, debate everybody and win. That being said, there are some apologists that I would like to debate, but the problem is it's really just for my own vanity. Like, so I would love to debate against, Cliff and Stuart Connectly. It wouldn't be a good debate by any means. He would, trample out, all of the atheists, all of the apologist talking points poorly. He would stumble over his feet trying to give bad arguments from his perspective, and I would just pounce on him every single time. And in the end, he'd learn nothing from it. He'd go out next week and give the same dumb arguments. So like, I would debate him just so I can have the video clip showing how ridiculous he is. But other than that, like, are there any legitimate atheists that I would enjoy debating for the sake of the conversation? I mean, non-atheists, like actual theists. I would really enjoy debating William Lane Craig. I think he's insightful. I think he bites a lot of bullets that Christians aren't willing to bite. Like he'll bite the crazy bullet of like God committing genocide. I can display to everybody that having a PhD doesn't make your arguments better. Having a PhD just means you have fancier words to explain the horrific shit that the people without PhDs are doing. But as an intellectual, I think he counts as an intellectual. And I mean, overall, I think he's a halfway decent guy. Like, I think he's doing the best he can. I don't think he's out here trying to be intellectually dishonest. I think he believes the stuff that he's spewing. I also like Mike Licona. I don't know if Mike Licona gets a lot of respect in a debate space, but I like him a lot. I think he's knowledgeable. Obviously, I disagree with his position. I would... Let's see. I don't know if I'd like to debate Gary Habermas because I don't think that'd be a fair debate because I'm more of an Old Testament guy and he's a New Testament guy. And he would cook me on some of the New Testament stuff, I'm sure. And then I'd cook him on the Old Testament stuff. But I mean, Gary Habermas is another guy on the other side of the aisle that I do like. I just disagree with him wholeheartedly. And there are other scholars on the other side that I like a lot. I love Daniel Wallace, another conservative scholar. Disagree with him wholeheartedly. If I was on a debate stage with him, I would cook him as much as I could. But Daniel Wallace is more of a critical textual scholar than a debater. So that being said, I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time worrying about what apologists are up to. I just haven't. I don't spend any time watching Apologist channel. I don't subscribe to them. I don't watch their videos. I don't know what kind of dog shit arguments they're putting out there because they haven't changed in 20 years. So why should I watch them? I have no idea what's happening in the world of Christian apologetics. Therefore, I don't really have a hit list of guys that I want to debate because I've already read the books. I read all their shitty talking points 20, 25 years ago. And they weren't good then. They weren't good talking points even when I was a Christian. Frank Turek's talking points were shitty even as an 18-year-old Christian reading his book. As an 18-year-old Christian, I read, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And I said, this guy has got dog shit talking points. I will get dog walked trying to use this in a debate. And so like, I have no desire to debate these people on their dog shit talking points that just haven't been good and they haven't been updated and haven't been changed in 2 decades. They're not interesting to me. But if I got the opportunity to debate Frank Turek, would I do it? Oh, at a drop of a hat. Jordan Peterson too. I wouldn't mind cooking Jordan Peterson. That would be delightful, actually. I would have a good time doing that. But I got to be honest, Jordan Peterson's a lightweight. He shouldn't be in the apologetics debate space. He has no idea what he's talking about biblically. Nothing. He has zero idea of what he's talking about biblically. In fact, when the Jubilee episode drops in June, 1 Christian verse 25 atheists, if they didn't cut it, you're going to see him getting absolutely roasted by Danny and by Ian and by others. He got his ass lit up. So anyways, good question. But guys, thank you so much for being here. I got to call it tonight. I got to get to bed. I really appreciate all the kindness and the support and the questions. The Q&As are fun for me. I get a lot of people asking me to do Q&As, so I feel like this is probably a good thing to do it. If you have more questions and you want to connect offline, send me an email or connect with me into the Discord. We'd love to see you there. And there's lots of other knowledgeable people in the Discord. It's not just me. It's for the whole community. And so you'll find in the Discord community, like a lot of the questions that you might ask me, you'll find perfectly good answers or better answers from people already in the Discord. So definitely join up with that Discord community. I got a burp, sorry. Definitely join up that Discord community